In this episode, I'm talking to the fashion legend Garance Doré, live in our Bloomsbury store. Garance is a writer, illustrator and photographer, and her blog is one of the most influential in the world. She was once described by the New York Times as the guardian of all style, and she'll be talking candidly about her life from the early years in a Corsican seaside town right through to the present day in Los Angeles. Tonight is a really special evening for me because for many years I've followed the writing, the photography, the illustration and indeed the life of Garance, and it's been inspirational as it is to many people, and it's really exciting and amazing to have her here tonight. So I'm just going to read two quotes in case... there's my tissue. It's really well done. I'm just going to read two quotes which I found about Garance, which kind of sums her up. The first is, she's the best thing to happen to fashion since Grace Coddington, which is an incredible accolade, and that was in The Guardian. And the second is, I hope you're not getting embarrassed here, but...
I love it.
The second is even better. Even better. Should I take that off?
Yes. There you go.
That'll ruin the video. The second is that she is the guardian of all style, and that was in the New York Times. So we're going to find out a little bit about her life and her loves in a minute, but that kind of sums her up. So first of all, a huge welcome to Garance Doré.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone. Thank you.
So how are you, and what brings you to London?
Okay, I'm good. We found a new trick, which is flying to London during the day instead of doing the red eye, and I'm alive. And I just arrived yesterday evening.
And you've just discovered that after all these years of traveling?
After all these years, I used to always be like, when you fly to Europe, you leave in the evening and you arrive in the morning as a zombie. Yeah. And that's what you're going to stay for. Yeah, so I'm feeling really good.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to have you here. I think the first thing I wanted to ask you was, somebody like you who has so many different aspects to your career and to your life, when you're on the plane and you have to fill in that thing that says occupation, what do you put? How do you describe what you do?
I really do, depending on my mood. Like, creative director, writer. I just change. I don't think they really look at it, do they?
Do you like having, but the point is, you like having lots of different aspects, or do you like to say you're one particular thing?
No, I like that I can't describe what I do.
Right.
Yeah, it's that's the gift of my life, right? It's that I can move from one thing to the other, and I was just talking with someone earlier. Maybe it's just you. Was telling me about the evolution of my work, and I'm so happy that I've been able to keep the interest of the audience through evolving, which in the beginning was very scary because I thought, I found my niche, but I've evolved from niche to niche, I guess, and because I just couldn't stay in one place. Yeah. Great. Mm-hmm.
So can we go, if it's okay with you, can we go right back to the beginning? Can you explain to us a little bit about where you were born and brought up, what kind of background you had, and where the early influences were on your life?
Yes, I was born in Corsica from immigrant parents. My mom was from the north of Africa, Morocco, and Algeria, and my dad first generation from Italy. So we were not really Corsican, but definitely part of the culture. And my dad was a chef and had a restaurant in a very remote place in Corsica. So I really grew up in nature, but then I started going to school in the city. So I have this kind of, the city. It's like you would call it a village. We're in London. But so I really had this fun, multicultural, weird upbringing.
Multicultural because it was a seaside town and there was tourists.
There was many things. Like first there was the fact that one side of my family was Muslim. We're living in a more Catholic background, and all that. So there was all these things. And then there was definitely the culture of like being a wild child in nature, and then that idea of like going back to more culture, the city and school and all these things. So I always had to mix a lot of things. And then when at the restaurant that my dad was running, a lot of people that I wouldn't have access to in my life would come. So I don't know, celebrities like writers, like TV people and all that. So I saw Brigitte Bardot. I saw because it was like so many people were coming there. And Corsican people are very known for being a proud people, and so we would never bother. There was never this like fan attitude, but I would watch these people come and go and their lifestyle. So I was there with like a lot of different influences. And you were asking me about my first inspiration, and my mom is this very complex personality who is very curious and was very adaptable, I guess. And even though she came from very modest background, my grandma was a cleaning lady, my mom just got into everything. She was a very cool young woman. As soon as she started making a little bit money, we always had magazines at home, and she would go and, it was the 80s when they started making some money. She would go buy these like Jean-Paul Gaultier dresses and all that. But then like she would wear them at my village, whereas like, there's not even a road. You have to go there on a boat. And I remember because I was ashamed. I was like, I can't believe this is my mom. She's coming. It's like, but she's like this kind of ab-fab, cool, like just being herself, having fun. And so she's a big
Where
influence.
Where did she get that from then?
No idea.
If her mother was a cleaner, I mean, there was something somewhere within her DNA.
I don't know, but I know that she has that courage of... She was just cool. She has that thing. I can't explain. Yeah. I can't explain, because all the women from her generation, usually it like evolves slowly. Like, so my grandma was, I think she came to Corsica when she probably was like 30 or something. And of course, like she didn't speak the language. So, became a cleaning lady. And then usually like the first generation of people that are born there are going to start having jobs that are more like, I don't know, like usually they become teachers, or, it's like, and slowly you get access to more culture. And like, I don't know what happened with my mom. She was just, a little bit crazy in some ways, but also in a great way, like very creative, very eager. Do you know when she turned 53, she became a therapist? She went back to school. And now she's
still
done.
in Corsica. Still.
Yeah, in Corsica. She always
moved,
stayed in Corsica. And now she's done. She's like, she's 10 years later. She's young and she's 64. She's like, oh, I'm done with that. I don't know what's next. She wants to sculpt. Cool. She's just like, So it's interesting to have somebody that just thinks that things are possible, I guess.
And a big influence, obviously. I can tell the way.
But don't get any ideas. She didn't encourage me to be an artist. She still had these, and that's the thing. That's why I say complex. It's tricky because she also, wanted me to, and that's also something with immigrants' children, be a doctor or be a lawyer and have one of these, very serious, because I was pretty good at school. Yeah. And so I had this pressure. I'm a firstborn and all that. So like, and it took me a long time to find my way. Because I had all that pressure on my shoulders, and also I'm a good kid, so I really wanted to make everyone happy. So there was a lot of inspiration, a lot of pressure. It was complex, a very hard world for me to understand.
What about your father? Because I read also that your father was a big influence when you were young.
Yeah, well, my father is different. It's not as complex, very simple, like... family man. My mom was not a family woman. Right. And they divorced when I was 14. And very passionate, hardworking. He was, started in a kitchen. I think because my mom was so ambitious, started getting successful in the restaurant business and became a business owner and all that. But he had this, I don't know, very loving personality, and also this very hardworking that I think really influenced me, and this artistry about his cooking. I remember because our restaurant was seasonal, in Corsica, most restaurants, and so he would spend the winter looking for new recipes and, testing new things. I remember in the, I don't know, early 90s or late 80s, like starting to experiment with cooking with the microwave, for example, at the time where it was, so it's just like always pushing. We were eating flowers 15 years ago or more, more, like he was always looking at what was around. Like I remember he would send me in nature to go get wild mint, that we have in Corsica and all that. So always integrating things like that. He was curious and passionate and really loved excellence. I remember like he would wake up at 5 to go water his plants because nobody would do it as well as he would do it,
Wow. Yeah.
So really like kind of crazy in a way. He sort of ran himself into, at the end he gave up because it was just too much. But it was beautiful to see that, and the place that he created was amazing. And that's why we also got all these celebrities and all that, because it became kind of.
What was I want to go to that restaurant.
Yes, well, it's close. I mean, it's not close.
Somebody
my dad is not there. It's still beautiful, but it's in a little place in Corsica called Girolata,
right?
Which you can only go by boat. They didn't build a road to go there, so it's either you walk for 2 hours, like hike.
Oh, God, I love it.
With your grandson shoes.
Yeah.
Or
available at all good stores.
Or you take a boat and the restaurant is like an outdoors, just imagine the dream Corsican restaurant,
wow.
Like,
sounds like a film.
with like trees like growing in the restaurant. And my dad has this giant fireplace where, they would grill like, I don't know. And the stop me when I'm talking too much.
No, I'm loving it.
Because I can go on forever. But the village is in a UNESCO reserve, like a protected place where only one fisherman is allowed to fish, still to this day. Wow. And he was fishing for my dad's restaurant. So you would get like the best fish of the best place, blah, blah, blah. So it was pretty beautiful. Like every morning we would get all the langoust, the lobster, and the fish, and then my dad would like pick it and see what it was doing that day. And so it's kind of the dream, but it was also 20 years ago. Like now it seems like, you see all these chefs on Netflix and all that, and but he was doing that a long time ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I grew up. It was a lot of different weird influences.
And you were in and amongst the restaurant and seeing all the cooking.
I was.
Were you kind of there every day? Did you live right by the restaurant kind of thing?
Like in the restaurant,
in the
basically.
Restaurant, yeah.
Well, not only that, but again, there comes my mom. I mean, my dad was like that, but they put us to work, me and my brother and sister, so early.
Is there somebody watching?
Yeah, somebody's
going. It's one of the downsides of sitting in the window.
So we started. We started working. I don't know. I think when I was 13, I started working in the restaurant, and it was really annoying. But then I started finding the trick because I was this curious kid, and I told my mom, "Okay, I work, but I want to go travel. I want you to use that money to pay for a trip for me and all that." So my first trip was in England. I came here when I was 14, went to a family in Turkey. Do you know that city?
Yeah, Turkey, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Faulty Towers. Do you know Faulty Towers?
No.
I won't go into that now. Okay. I'll explain later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's an English comedy that's based in Turkey.
Oh, okay. Well, I was there when I was 14 doing windsurfing because that was my thing at that time. Wow. And I met a boy called Justin. He was my windsurfing teacher, and it was probably my first it's like, oh my God, I'm falling in love. And I remember because before going to Turkey, we came to London for 2 days. I think it was part of a group, and then we would stay in a family, and I got lost.
In London? In
London. Oh, and there was no cell phones, nothing. No. And I was 14, and I was like, what have I didn't really speak English. And a cab driver stopped, and I was very scared. And he was like, hop on. And he looked for the people that I had lost for like an hour and a half with us,
Oh,
and
wow.
just like saved me basically.
You were lucky.
I thought everybody was
God,
like this,
you had to get a
you know,
tattoo anyway. Yeah,
just the
yeah, yeah.
nicest. And I was like, how much do I owe you? I
Oh.
was ready. He was like, you're
Oh,
good.
how nice.
Yeah, very nice. That was a good memory.
So going back to Corsica and that time, when did you first realise you were creative? Can you remember starting to think, you know, this is what I love doing? Were you good at school? Were you, you know, were you good at art? What was the thing? When did you first kind of...
Yeah, I was thinking, that's the funny part. So I was always creative. Was always doing drawings and I don't know, just naturally creative, and also very good at school in the beginning until I became lazy. But that's the funny thing is like when I was young, everybody's like, and I was playing, overachiever. I was doing classic like ballet. I was playing the cello. I was learning to write music. My life was basically like busier than what it is today.
Wow.
And so everybody, and I was talented at like music and all that. So everybody was like pushing me, until it was too much pressure. And I started becoming a rebel. At 14, I told my mom, I can't do all of these, like this is crazy. And she resisted for a few years. And at one point I stopped everything.
Wow.
It was just too much.
Yeah. How did she take that?
I think she just gave up. She was just, and then started my years of just, being a punk basically, and just doing whatever trying to do whatever I wanted. I don't know if we should go into that, but...
But were you into fashion at that point? I mean, when you were like 14, 15?
Yeah, so that's when I always was. So my mom and my dad... So Corsica is interesting. I guess it's changed now. But like, it's this like very provincial place. I don't know if you guys, like any of you come from, where people look at you because they know, oh, she's like Kira's daughter, knows da-da-da, blah, blah, blah. And that's something that's going now. People don't look at each other. And I don't know if it's good or bad. And I also think that's why we love Instagram, because people don't look at each other. So that's a way to be looked at in a way. And so like the way you were dressed was quite important. The car you drive, the shoes you wear, like, because every day life is kind of a stage. You go to the local cafe and like your neighbors are like the people, which is, I hated. I was like, I want to live in a big city. I want to be anonymous. I don't want people. But the thing is like, part of the culture is like, you would imagine in Italy or something, like people are always dressed because like, you go out and you're like, hi, hello. Like, so your image is actually very important. Whereas in LA, I can spend my day in yoga pants. If I decide I'm not going to see no one, there is not that thing. So it was a weird like scene like that. It's like in Barcelona where there's the Rambla, where people, it's the same. Like people would be sitting at the cafe, and you would walk by, or like, and so there is really that idea of being on stage all the time. And so in Corsica, when I grew up at that time, there was really there was a lot of like fashion stores and it was actually important the way you were dressed.
Right.
So I hated it. I was like, but I was conscious. And that's when I also started, there was always magazines at home. And then when I started becoming more myself, I started very early buying The Face. There was one magazine store in my little city. And every day I would go and see what was there and save money and buy these magazines. And that's when I started developing my own sense of
So what kind
style.
of thing did you pick up from The Face back then?
Everything.
Because it was incredible, wasn't it?
Incredible. And 20 Ans also, which was a French magazine that was actually really cool in terms of fashion. And actually, Karine Wattfeld was working there and all that at that time. I didn't know their names, but I was like, wow, these girls look really cool. And they look like they don't care about anything. That's how I want to be and all that.
And of course, they do care about everything.
Yeah, but at that time, I was like, wow. What did I pick up? I guess, Tim, I think everything. You have no idea when you have no internet. Remember, like no internet in Corsica. Like I remember, I couldn't buy a pair of Converse. I couldn't buy like, the stores where it was all like very French, like local kind of things. And so that was my only source of cool. I was probably the
Yeah.
coolest person, and that's the only place where I could get that. So I would like leak the magazines. I would like, it was a Bible. I would like look, like I would buy them, not open it, go to my bedroom, and it
Yeah.
was a ceremony. And I would read them and reread them. And so everything I would like, that's also how I learned English. And
What strikes me is that from reading your book, you're incredibly hungry for
so hungry.
information
Yeah.
about, and a lot of your kind of fashion influences were things that you would grab onto, like you were interested in a boy when you were younger, and he was dressed a certain way, and you would really get into dressing that way. Or there was a magazine, The Face, and you would devour it and look at all the or there was Zara, you got into Zara and wearing stuff, all that kind of stuff. And you're obviously born with this incredible hunger for the subject and learning about it and wanting to take it on.
Yeah.
That's been throughout your career, I think.
And even now, which is really interesting, because I thought, I thought like it was about fashion for a while. And people told me it was about fashion, but I realized my curiosity and my hunger is actually broader than that. I think it's just like, because I've done fashion, and I'm actually talking on Thursday at the Voices conference to talk about the fact that I left fashion after 8 years or something, maybe 10, because I had answered most of my questions. So I think it's more almost like I don't know, it's like a curiosity, something like more journalistic, or like, where I like to enter a world and have this passion and this hunger and discover, and
very journalistic, definitely,
something like that, something of like living an adventure. And that's I think my most persistent trait is my taste for adventure, for like new worlds and all that, and whether they're imaginary or whether it's like traveling. As I said, like I started traveling alone when I was 14. My travel the next year was in America. I went to LA for the first time alone at 15.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I started traveling like
alone at 16 to LA.
Yeah.
Wow.
So like I was staying in a family there, and then it just started there, and then I started meeting people. I went to Syria when I was 17. It's just like Africa. I was just very, very curious. And so I think it's still that spirit that animates me,
Right.
And I like to embrace. I think now I'm doing more work on myself, and so I'm less, how can I say, identify less with the subject. Like I won't want to become that person anymore. But there was this part of like just curiosity. I think one day a friend of mine came to Corsica, and he was like, I now understand everything. He was like, I see where you come from. He came to my village, I think.
Oh, I see.
And he was like, I understand that thirst, for culture. And it's a lot of people like that. I remember reading, because it was in the 90s and all that, interviews from Bjork, who comes from Iceland, and she was talking about that, the fact that when you feel isolated when you're young,
you're
then
more hungry.
you're just like more, and there is Corsican people everywhere. I have 2 Corsican friends in LA. Like they're everywhere, because there is this kind of explosion of like, let's go.
Probably some here tonight,
Maybe, I don't know.
So the next big kind of, I'm quite interested in, you've made several big seismic changes location-wise in your life.
Yeah,
we'll
true.
come back to that later, but the next big one is moving to Paris and living in Paris, I guess. So I think you went to college in Marseille, but you ended up in Paris.
Yeah.
So what was it like coming from where you came from in this village, or and ending up in Paris? It must have been a shock, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or was it amazing?
No, it was bad. So...
Sorry for asking.
No, it's okay. It's cool. Like, we can talk about it. So...
How old were you when you arrived?
Well, Paris was late, because what happened is that I started my blog when I was 31. I was talking to your wife earlier, and we were talking about late blooming,
Yeah.
which is really my case.
Yeah, we'll come back to that later.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping for the same thing.
Well, you're doing it. um, and um, and then my blog like really exploded really fast, and that's when I decided, okay, this is
Where
my
were you
chance.
when you started the blog?
In Marseille.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, except
okay.
I was not saying
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I was hiding it
Right.
from. And so basically, there's a little story there, because like when I was 27, I told myself, I decided I'm gonna be an illustrator. Fuck it, I'm going to be poor, but I'm gonna just do that because I can't. And at that time,
Wasn't the choice that or teacher?
yeah, exactly. So
How did you make that decision? That's a pretty big. Again, it's like one of these forks in the road. That
it was awful. My 20s were just so much anxiety and stress.
Mm.
But so I was a student, and I was kind of like laming at my studies. I don't know, because I was going, but I didn't know and all that. But on the side, I was making all these friends that were all musicians, artists. You know, when you have that thing and you're like, oh, there is a sign there, you know, something's showing me something. All my friends are starving artists.
yeah.
And of course, you're 20 usually if you're an artist, like, you know, that's what's going to happen. And but the thing is, like, having these people around me, I realized that being a starving artist was a cool actually thing. You could do it and have fun and do good things and have an interesting life. I think it kind of showed me a way.
Yeah.
And yes, at some point, I was the responsible one. I always had a job. If you remember, since I was 13, I was working. I was paying my studies with like a supervisor job that I have had in a high school, and which, you know, could be like, you know, and I had enough diplomas that I could become a teacher if I would pass the I don't know how you call that, the tests and all that. And I was like, okay, so my choice is either to become a teacher and I'll have this like not a lot of hours in a week that I have to work, and then all these holidays like vacations and all that, and I can be an artist during these times, because I knew I wanted to be creative. I just didn't know really exactly what it meant. But or I'm going to just do whatever I want and just be an illustrator, because that's the thing that was like, you know, important. That's the thing that I was doing naturally, and I'll be poor and I'll be fine, you know. And so I didn't even think, I told myself, there's 95% of chance that you'll be like starving all your life, but there is like also the 5% that you're gonna do great, and that, you know, something's gonna happen. And if you become a teacher, there is 100% chance that you'll know where you'll be in 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, there is like, you'll know, and you actually know.
Yeah.
You know, like in 2025, I'll be on, you know, so, and
Which for some people is really good, and
Yeah,
for other
exactly.
people it's not so good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And for
But-
me, I was like, let's take a chance. I
Yeah.
can go back. I was starting to be more relaxed. I'm not a very relaxed school person. I actually have like, you know, a lot of anxiety about stuff. So, but I did it. And in order to do that, I also left my job, because I knew that this day job was also keeping me, you know, comfortable enough, but not really, and all that.
Yeah.
So I left everything and I threw myself in that thing and didn't do well. And it was weird, because at the same time I was not doing well, but at the same time I was loving my life.
Yeah.
So that was another sign. I was like, okay, things are really going downhill really fast.
But I'm happy.
But I'm so happy.
Yeah.
And I...
Was the blog was up and running by this point?
No, the blog came at that moment.
Okay.
So things are going downhill really fast, but I'm happy. But I'm not getting the jobs that I want. And the jobs I'm getting, I don't like. So here is my last card. I'm going to open a blog. At that time, there was no blog success stories or something. But I thought, here is a true story. I started illustrating, and I started doing these drawings that would take me 3 weeks. You know, it was literally art, and actually started being picked up by like art publications and all that, but that doesn't bring money. And then when a magazine would call me, I don't know if anybody like works in press, but they pay you $200. And if it takes you 3 weeks to do an illustration,
Yeah.
you just make the math. And I was like, wow, I really picked a great career. This is going to be amazing. So I launched the blog in order, my goal, so I had a few rules when I launched it. And, I was like, maybe one day an art director will see it. But the goal was to learn, to teach myself to draw an illustration in less than an hour. So I was like, you post 3 times a week and you have to finish in 1 hour. And if you're not finished, you publish it even more, it's not finished. So that was my shame. I shamed myself into working faster. Yeah. So it completely changed my style of illustrations, and that's how I started. So if you look at the blog, because everything is still online, right? 14 years. My first drawings were like lines, like,
So can we see your original blog then?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to see
that. Yeah, go see.
What was your first post?
The shame is there, but it's terrible. It's not terrible, it's cute. It was just an illustration of me.
Do you
and
ever
my
reread
cat.
them? Do you ever go back?
Yeah. I think it's like
it's healthy,
true to me. It's okay. Like in the beginning, so there was that rule of the time.
Yeah.
And then in those 3 years, because it was like I started when I was 27, and then I had a little bit of money from my job, which I spent going to Paris, like showing my work to art directors that I would just knock at their door. And you were working in advertising, you know how it is, like some weirdo from Marseille coming to knock at your door, and and I would sneak in, right? I would literally be like, going through the things and showing my shitty drawings and all that, and didn't have the look, didn't have the right everything. So and then the cherry on the cake was like, I told them I was coming from Marseille, which is like, I don't know, saying you come from Turkey or something, and you're like, and
not
I
quite
could
the same,
see their look, on their face. And so when I started, and I was like, that's so dumb, But when I opened my blog, that's why I decided I'm never going to talk about where I come from and see what happens. And obviously, like, as soon as people started picking up and like being like, oh, we'd like to work with that person, they assumed I was coming from Paris. They were like, come see us at our office this afternoon. I was like, I'm very busy. Can't come.
Yeah.
And then I would group these meetings and like do a trip to Paris and go see the people. But that's kind of how it started, where I was like, I checked, like I understood the market and I tried to work with it. Yeah.
And of course, back then, blogging was almost non-existent, wasn't it? I mean, was it?
No, it was like terrible. It was like people with no life.
Yeah.
That.
I didn't want to say that, but
that were like probably very ugly to have to like hide behind a screen.
Yeah.
It was like I didn't tell anyone that I was doing it because it was really, really bad. Like it was like 13 or 14 years ago. It was like I literally like it was shameful.
But were people
the same way like online dating was?
Right.
Remember?
Yeah.
Now we're all like, swiping and all that. But I mean, I am.
I'm not, but
I am.
Just so you
Julia,
Julia,
It's not really good. You're not missing anything. But at the time, like people wouldn't say like how did you meet? Oh, you met at a cafe, and it was not true. And that's the same. I didn't tell anyone. So it was really shameful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so were people reading it though? Was it? I'm interested how you started with the blog and it ended up becoming huge.
That was crazy. So that's when you meet your destiny, right?
Yeah.
Something happened. My life was like, I knew that there was something about me. There was something like I always thought I'm pretty funny and cool, right? I don't know. But at the same time, I was very French. You know how French people are? Maybe like British people are a little bit the same.
They're great.
No, they're like, fake modest or like this weird, like sorry, and don't show that, you like yourself. Like always like, oh no, I'm horrible. Yeah. And like all that kind of thing. Yeah. And so I was like very like confused about what I was allowed to want or like what I was allowed to say about myself and like, the layers of like bullshit that we have to deal with just to be able to like put ourselves out there is crazy. Like culturally, I'm still fighting against it. And I moved to America. One of the reasons I did was because in America you can say like, I want this and I am that, you know. In France, it's just like the pressure is like, okay. So it's hard to do stuff. Anyway, so I was, what was the question? Remind me.
We were, I've completely forgotten now. But we were talking about how the blog really took
yeah.
off, and,
So
there was a moment when
that was like,
it
oh,
must
yeah.
have started off with like 2 or 3 people reading it, and then what was the
Yeah, so destiny meeting. So I was like,
ah.
I just want to express the person that I was before, which is like a loser, not succeeding
We
at
don't believe any
anything.
of this. I
No,
mean,
but it's true. I was like, as I said, like in my scene, in my city, I was like going to the right concerts, and like I was probably like pretty cool in the way I was dressing and all that, but I hadn't done anything. That had nothing to prove to myself that I was good at anything. I'd kind of like weirdly fucked up my studies when I was pretty good student, but like nothing really came out of it. There was really nothing that I'd never shine anywhere. And then suddenly I open the blog and I just do my thing. And weirdly, maybe it's because of the screen, that hiding behind just myself and being funny and all that. And like, yeah, I started with 1 or 2 followers or like people reading, but in 2 weeks, I don't know, like some bloggers picked it up and talked about my work, and it like literally exploded. Like,
wow.
and 3 weeks later,
Because there was no Instagram to promote it or anything like that,
No.
was there? It's just the blogging
it
community.
was like a fire, it's just like you can't stop it. It was crazy. And a magazine called me, was my first interview 3 weeks after opening the blog.
Wow.
From Paris, like L'Express was like, oh, we want to interview. It was like 2 lines, like Garance Doré, blah blah blah, and then it was just like it was just I went on a ride that started in 2006 and kind of is ending now in a way, because now I'm starting. It's a weird like new page that I'm turning.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess like it stopped when I moved to LA. That's when, there was a moment of like, okay. But I can't tell you, it was like suddenly like hopping on a fast train and then dealing with everything and success.
And it was all fashion, was it then? Back in the early days? Were
No,
you talking
it
about
started
lifestyle and what you were doing?
I mean, it started like as a real like illustration
Okay.
with like sketches and like
Yeah.
funny doodles and all that. So the first industry that kind of caught that was the magazine. So I started like getting, magazine jobs. People were calling me. That's when I moved to Paris. Then, so I moved to I was so broke. You have no idea. Like so broke. And at some point, my friend that I was like sleeping on our couch in Paris was like, look, that's enough now. So anyway, I was like, okay, I'm going to move to Paris. I had 2,000 bucks, euros, and that was it. And you know how it's so weird? And like, I know I come from LA and I should just shut up with that, but like how the universe just like helps at some point. I moved to Paris and I was like, I didn't know what I was going to do to pay my rent. And even though I was starting to get attention, like illustration doesn't pay. And I got a job as a writer at AOL. They called me and they're like, we love your writing. And I was like, I was just writing a few stories under my illustrations just to connect more with people. Like in my mind, I was an illustrator, I was not a writer. And they called me and they were like, we'll give you that much money. It was basically a salary to write 3 stories a week.
Wow.
And they saved my life, you know? And suddenly I had a job and I was like, I could pay my rent. And that's how it started. And then I started like getting different gigs, like, different jobs like that. So that was in the beginning. And I was writing about everything. It was more like, almost like, cosmopolitan, like, I don't know, like just writing about funny stuff about women's stories and like a little bit fashion and all that. But then it crystallized more into fashion when moving in Paris. I saw stylish people because like the story is also that I was maybe a little bit cool in my city, but then I moved to Paris and I looked like crap. So I had to educate myself. I didn't like that because I'm proud Corsican, I was like, no, I need to be. And so I picked up a camera and I went to Fashion Week, outside Fashion Week, not inside, just like nobody knew me. And I had that camera and I started shooting people. And that's when another wave of success, like people loved the photos, and obviously like this is summed up, like there was little moments, but like, and another faster train, like even more like international, like success, like travels and all that. And yeah, my life became very glamorous suddenly, and
But
that's when.
you're ridiculously modest because you make out that you kind of did a bit of photography and then some train picked you up and took you off and everything. But clearly,
Not that
each
modest.
of these things
Yeah.
have been before their time. The key thing about what you're talking about is you were very, very early
Yeah,
on the
I
blogging,
can
the
do a
street
little bit of
style, and all of
pretentious
that.
if you want for a second.
Yeah, come on,
Yeah.
you know.
So
But there was something going on there.
something going on. So when I picked up the camera, I realized that I had a big talent.
That's better. That's better.
No, I mean that's actually. I started understanding. No, it's not true. I started understanding my influence on the fashion industry very, very late in the game. And I have a witness here, which is Emily. I don't know where she is, but she's been working with me for 8 years. And I think
The wonderful Emily.
the
over there.
wonderful Emily. And I had no idea. Like, even when people started like copying what I was doing, like sucking all the creativity out of the blog that became, I had no idea. And then one day I started looking around. I was like, I did that. And so, yeah, in the beginning, I was very very humble. And also it was nice because I was this little mouse, right? Like doing everything I could and all that. But I was also courageous, but also I didn't have an ego because I came from nowhere. So it also was propelling me. And when you don't have any pretension, you can sneak in a show, you don't care, and you can so all these things that I did in the beginning were also because I felt I had nothing to lose. I had nothing. I literally but I realize I have good taste, and so that's something that as you start becoming a professional, and you very much probably know that, it's rare. And it's a value, and it's something. And now I know what I bring to the table, and I'm a very good observer, so I can feel, and I feel things, and maybe because I'm curious, I feel things often before other people do. So now I'm conscious of all these things, and they're still present.
Yeah.
But it did take me a while to understand that.
So that's Paris. I mean, that's too short a time to talk about your time in Paris. But then you moved to New York.
Mm-hmm.
So why? And why New York? Because I'm interested in these big kind of location moves, which most people don't make one big location move in their life, and you've made several.
So I didn't like Paris at all, which is also funny because people often
Why not?
say...
Why didn't you like Paris?
Yeah, people often say, "Oh, you're the epitome of Paris chic," and I'm like, okay. For a while, I was like, yeah, sure. I didn't like Paris because of the weather.
Okay. You don't like London then?
No, I love London, but I couldn't live here because of the weather. It makes me, I come from Corsica.
Yeah, no.
From parents that come also from the south and all that. So it was hard for me. The gray sky was hard. The grind, that sense of taking the metro and all that thing. And that's not something that I felt I was ever part of. It was weird, but there was really that thing. And then Parisians, they're the worst. They're not very nice.
Yeah.
They're always complaining. They'll say that themselves, have you ever when you come from America and people are nice in America, and that's why, they're like, "Hi, how are you? Oh my God, this is great. Welcome to our store." In Paris, they'll be like,
yeah.
So you come from America and you get in a cab in Paris, and the person is horrible, the cab driver is horrible. I'm always like, oh yeah, forgot. There again. Here we go again. That thing. So in the south of France, it's a little bit different. People are a bit warmer and all that. And for me, it was a big shock. The complaining, the harshness, the judgment. And even if I was going past that and be like, oh, there are nice people. When you start knowing your boulanger, he starts being nice. And, you can create something. And some people, I could find my way. But the making friends was super hard because Parisians are very cliquey. I don't know how it is but so if you come and you're new, like they've had their friends since they were young, and before you become part of something, it takes years. So, I mean, I did stay not a long time in Paris, only 4 years, and I was traveling. So obviously, if I had stayed more, like I'm not. I mean, I have friends in Paris that are wonderful, but as a general thing, it was not a great experience for me. And so the first time I started moving to, like, going to New York for Fashion Week, New York was having a great moment at that time. It was the beginning of Alexander Wang and like all that. It was really cool. Everybody wanted to live in New York, which is not the case right now.
No.
I went there, and I really want to say, I'm not kidding. It's so important for me when people are nice, and that's one of the reasons I love London. People are so funny and nice.
Really?
They're always joking.
London?
Yes.
Oh my
The
God.
sense of humor
Wow.
is like, that's when I was like, if I had to come back to Europe, that's probably just because, like,
I bet you go to Paris then and say, the thing I hate about London is they're so miserable. And Paris, it's amazing, they're fabulous.
I always say the truth. No. It's really like, we were talking about it with Emily. It's like, I can, and in America, I mean, and in LA, even more than in New York, people are just
But you don't,
nice.
what, we get this thing a little, we go to New York a lot.
Yeah.
And there can be this thing where, Joe and I were talking about it on our last trip, where we asked we had all these things to do. Can you send this box somewhere? Can you hold our bag until we get back? And can I get into my room early? And all these kind of things. And they were so charming and so delightful, and they said no to everything. And it was like, is there nobody actually wants to help us at all, but they say it in a really lovely way.
Yeah,
and it's like,
I know.
oh yeah, certainly we'll do whatever we can. No, you can't do that. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
I'm so
I
sorry. And we
know.
thought they were actually loving saying no.
I know.
But
But
did
isn't
you
it
not get
nicer,
that in New
though?
York at all?
No,
The bit
you
that-
do. Yeah. People
Yeah.
like will tell you no, but
It's a little bit of underneath the surface. Are they really happy?
but I like that better.
Yeah, a bit of superficiality.
Yeah, a bit of like just like smiling and all that. I mean, honestly, I just vibe very well with that. So I don't know. I'm the type. And when I was a kid, I would go to everyone and say hi. And I didn't understand why not everyone was saying hi to everyone all the time. I come from a very small place. Of course, if I'd grown up in London, it wouldn't be the same. So I don't know. There was really that, and then I love the American lifestyle. Just like walking around with your coffee.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that I like. I can't explain. It's very, and
So what happened in New York though? Because it really took off, didn't it?
my work or New York?
Oh well, you as a person,
Well,
your work,
there we
everything.
go. Like in New York, so I was in Paris, and I would go, and people were like, "Oh, this is good. You're that blogger. We can't work with you right now, but And I came to New York, and people were like, "Come in. Like, we want to hear everything you have to say. Yes to that project." And this, right? In America, they want to hear your project. No?
Yeah.
Yeah. In France, nobody wanted to hear what I had to say, and it was really hard. Like, doors were really closed, and even today, like I mean, I'm not gonna get into that because it's insane. Like the I don't know, the cultural influence I've had in the world of fashion, and the number of things that I've helped change, and that's when I'm becoming more pretentious. But I'm now conscious of the value that I brought into this industry, and the level of I have never been recognized. I've never been in a cover of a magazine in France. I've, barely received any prize, like anything. I've had all these things all over the world. So, like, I'm still shocked. Elle was supposed to put me on their cover a few years ago. Then suddenly they didn't. And I'm not saying that because that's, I need recognition. I'm just saying, like,
Why do you think it is? Why is it? Is it anything to do with the fact that
I
you're
don't
not
think it's
from
about
Paris?
me. Oh, no,
It's
I
nothing
don't
to do
think
with
it's
that.
about me. I don't take it personally. I don't really even care. I think it's about French people looking at themselves. I think they can't recognize when they have value in their own country. There will be like an actress that nobody really cares about, or this and that. But like, and I'm kind of sad for that because it's for me. I don't care. I mean, I've made it in America, but like I just think of all this talent that is there, and I was there. I was in Paris, and everybody had their doors closed, and even to this day, you know, it keeps being like that, and I'm very surprised, and I think about all the young illustrators and all the young talents, and I'm like, this is so weird, but it's still happening. It's another conversation, but we definitely have in France, and I don't know if I don't think it's the same here, this fascination for other people from other countries, like, you know, everything that's made in America seems bigger and better and all that. And I've always lived that, and then I lived it as a talent, you know, as a person. So I don't care. I just feel like it's, you know, sometimes I wonder, like, it doesn't surprise me that there is this sense of sometimes of dread, you know, in France and all that, when you can't see yourself and recognize your own talent and the talents that you send in the world, and that are, you know, I don't know, psychologically, I think it says something.
And being in New York, you didn't have any of that. It's the land of opportunity and what have you.
Yeah, and still, like, you know, the curiosity, the openness, like, I think in America, people are always worried about missing something, which is stressful for them, but it's also good for you if you have ideas and projects, and like you want to do a new brand, or you want to, people are going to listen. And I feel like, you know, it's very helpful if you are entrepreneurial, if you have ideas and all that. So I really liked that.
So was it New York where the blog really took off and became huge? Or had it already before you left Paris?
In Paris, yeah. I think what really put me on the map was the street style.
Yeah.
So when I started doing the street style photography, and then it was just, you know, growth and growth year after year. Yeah.
Were you a fan of Bill Cunningham?
I don't really like his photography at all.
You don't? Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, I think he was like a great character.
Yeah.
I think he did an amazing documenting job. You know, I have his book, and I think it's interesting because he shot for decades. I think his photo was not interesting. Like, I don't care, and I don't care about his taste either. Like, I wasn't really interested in the type of people that he was shooting, because I think he says it himself, and I have great respect for him as an artist. I'm just saying that's not my taste. He liked to shoot the weirdos, you know, the crazies and all that. And as you probably know, because you know my work, I'm the contrary. I like to shoot the everyday. I like to shoot the jean and t-shirt. I like, you know, what we're wearing today. And more as I go. And so if you look at my work, we're at the polar opposites. And also I connect with people in my photos. So often you'll see they know I'm here. I'm looking at them in the eyes. I always take, even if it's a minute, there is always a connection. Like, I'll recognize somebody I've shot 10 years ago. Yeah. Like, they come to me and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember Australia, 2000, whatever. Bill Cunningham always shot people from the sides. You don't see him, he's hiding. So we are like the opposite of street style, but I really respect his work and him as a person. I think his story is fantastic, but I don't really care for his work.
Okay. So the next subject, you don't have to talk about, but you've posted quite a lot about what happened in New York and how you developed anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
And I find it fascinating because we've had it in our family, and it's really interesting hearing other people's stories and what have you. Are you comfortable about talking about that?
Of course, yeah.
So what happened in New York? How did it develop? And
yeah, I think I was...
You're living the amazing life. Everything is a dream. It's absolutely perfect. And then it doesn't feel right somehow.
Well, I had an episode. I had a panic attack when I was in my 20s. So I knew what it was. And I knew I didn't know it was anxiety, but I knew I was dealing with something, you know, like, you know, my heart beating, moments like that I didn't really recognize, or, you know, having that feeling of like, why am I feeling bad? And then having to go back to, oh, it's because I had that thought. 10 thoughts ago, I thought about my dad dying or something like that. And then I'm feeling bad, and then I had to go back and be like, my dad is not gonna die, and burp, and I would feel better. So there was this weird like emotional like swing back and stuff. And then I did therapy, felt much better. And then, then all that stuff we were talking about, New York and all that. And then I think I had a very unhealthy lifestyle without knowing. I think something you can do in your 20s, you can't do in your 30s and 40s. And so I was probably burnt out for a long time. I was traveling nonstop. I was eating whatever, a lot of sugar, which is it sounds stupid to say, but actually has a lot of influence on our emotions. I was not careful with myself, like my relationships, nothing was examined, So, and I think that now that it's kind of a big subject, so I'm trying to be precise about what I'm saying, but I think that now that I look back, I was probably hyper for 7 years. Hyper, like when you're like, doing things and you're into it and you're like so excited. And I have sleeping issues that are like not big, but enough to like put you in a state of, I don't want to use like psychological terms because they're very sensitive. Like, and if you had that in your family, so it's not a state of mania, of course, because I'm not bipolar, but this heightened state when you're like lacking sleep, you're not eating well, your life is crazy, you have a lot going on, people calling you, blah, blah. Like, always very busy in your head and you feel like... So I started, I was living that life. I chose the wrong relationships because I think, lost sense of who I was. So basically it was like this snowball effect. Because I was losing touch with who I was the more I was getting into that thing. And I don't know that I ever knew really who I was. That work on myself came later. But I guess the unhealthiness of all that kind of precipitated everything. And also, truly, I got absorbed by the world of fashion. So after being outside the shows, if you followed me, like started getting inside the shows and then started becoming a personality in fashion. Being sitting front row and people taking my photo and wanting to know what I think and all that. And it was such a symbol of success that I never took the time to ask myself if that was something that I really wanted. So there I was making a ton of money, being recognized, people sending me tons of clothes, traveling around the world. But at no moment had I decided to do that or thought, okay, this is really what I want. And so I was doing it, but I was really suffering through it. It was really hard. Like Fashion Week was just not like really me, but I thought, how can I complain, right? Look where I come from. And so I was kind of complaining to my friends and everybody was like, what the fuck? Like you have the life. Everybody wants your life and you're not happy? And I was like, no, I'm kind of happy, I guess. Okay, yeah, I guess, like I have everything that people want. And I pushed, like, Fashion Week after Fashion Week, and the panic attacks started becoming like really, really bad. And then it's kind of like make me want to cry, but like not in a bad way, but in like, in a way of like feeling for that person that I was, like how much I pushed myself. And then, it's not like I had a breakthrough. Like, I always laugh about these books that, self-help, which I've read a lot of, where the narrator is like, and then one day I said no to everything. And it's not how it happened. It happened in like millions of breakdowns, like millions of moments where I was like, can't do that anymore. Can't be treated like that. In fashion, people are not always nice to each other. That's the least that I can say. So like weathering all these things. And as I said again, like, I think I'm a pretty nice person. And, it's hard, like when people are not, and when they're like snobby and all that. It hurts my sense of things. It hurts my perception of life. You know, I see people as being beautiful and when and kind, and when somebody is not, is like my sense of the world is shattered. And I mean, I've changed and I accept more the good and the bad and all that, but it was really hard. And yeah, so there was mini breakdowns and bigger breakdowns. And then one day there was a moment, and I talk about it often, where I was on my way to a Chloe show. I was in this beautiful apartment in Paris. My room was like filled with beautiful clothes that, of course, I had paid none of them. A car was waiting for me downstairs. You know, imagine the movie, you know, like everything. And I was about to go to this Chloe show, and I just started crying, you know, but big cries, like, you know, you know. And so I called Emily. She was in New York, and I was like,
Asleep, probably in bed. Yeah.
Somewhere.
3 o'clock in the morning.
And I was like, I don't think I can go there. I don't think I can do it. And she told me, she was like, go to bed and you'll never have to go to a fashion show again. And it sounds so dramatic and dumb, because like fashion show is the dream of a lot of people. No. But that was a big moment for me. And that's when I think there was a shift, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do much less. And I was very scared. And like, you know, everybody that was asking, and that's when, you know, this is such a big conversation, because, you know, I learned that you need to learn to your own voice and your own feelings and all that. But, you know, like everybody was like, how can you let go of this? This is where you made your name. This is where you make your money. Like, nobody will care once you're out of fashion. Like, nobody will call you. Everybody will like look away, and you will. But I was like, it's that, or I'm going to have to become like a shell of myself, which is what I was becoming. So I stopped, but I think I had launched such a heavy machine that even after I stopped going to fashion shows and started changing my life slowly, I ended up hitting a depression at some point. And I moved to LA, and I think that's, you know, kind of crystallized at that moment when I think it was the time to like drop. And Emily and I had worked really hard to help me find a lifestyle that could make me feel, you know, like who I was. But that's when I hit like the lowest point of my life, where I was like, one day I woke up and I was like, I think dying would be great. And then, you know, from there on, I mean, you asked the question, I answer. Yeah.
I think the amazing thing is that you talk about it, you know, because it's so helpful to people with the similar issues, that you're so open about it and you lay yourself bare to everybody, which is amazing.
Thank
you. I read your posts, and they're not private at all. You tell what's going on, and it's really helpful. So I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
So LA, tell us about LA.
Yeah, so LA was so interesting because it was kind of a plane crash, you know. It's like crash landing. It's like, okay, let's go, and then go there, and then whatever. And I thought I would go there and, you know, imagine like, woo, but actually it's like, you know, dropping the weapons down, and you think you're going to rest and, I don't know, like work differently and all that, but actually like everything caught up with me. And I was finally able to look at my life and start, you know, being like, oh, there is that, and that relationship hurt me, and then this and that, I didn't do that well, and then this was great, I want to keep that, and just examine the thing that I hadn't done in 10 years, you know? So everything. It's funny because I came to LA really fast, I guess, and so I moved all my clothes. And I had 1 million of them from all these presents and all these fashion week years. And I think it's been 3 years and I'm almost done, like selling all of them, giving all of them and all that. It's been like, wow. And I think it's very symbolic of what I've had to do with my life. You know, it's like, I want to keep it a little bit, then go back and be like, no, actually, this reminds me of that. Or like, do I need this? Is this me? like all these things. So it's been kind of a weird, selfish journey. But it's funny how even though how clothes are really such a symbol, of who we are, who we are not. And I'm still clearing away layers of who I was not, and I tried to be. Yeah.
Wow. I'm conscious of the time.
I talk a lot.
No. But I just wanted to, before I open it up to everybody, I just wanted to get your view on the current state of influencers, the whole world that we live in now, and the thing that you've kind of partly left behind or whatever. What's your view now about Instagram, blogs, fashion?
There's so many
Do you
ways
still
we
follow
can
it
talk.
a lot? Do you still, or have you kind of checked out of everything?
No, I follow only things that make me feel good. I have unfollowed anything that makes me feel that I'm not part of it. I follow only things that inspire me. That's very important for me, that first layer of protection, because as you know, that's usually the first thing we do in the morning, looking at online and all that. So I think that's really important. But I'm very interested when something's creative and new. Like I love what Balenciaga is doing, for example, on their Instagram, and I'm eager to follow. And I follow Business of Fashion because I think it's interesting to see what's going on in the industry. And then, so I'm not like, I recognize talent. And I don't hate everything I did. Like I actually love the work I did all these years. There is many people that I love that I met during these years and all that. So it's hard to like talk in such a short time about something like that. But what I think is that one of my main thing, and that's why I talk about depression, anxiety, and all that, is that I think we're more susceptible today because there is less layers of protection, because we have these phones that come straight into our lives, directly like in our brains. And so I want to help people be conscious of that, even though myself I'm really not perfect and there is no way to be perfect, but help educate on our emotions and our moods and how important it is to sleep, because phones and other stuff take away a lot of hours of sleep, which makes people very emotional. They don't realize, and then they can lose their shit, and they don't even know that's because, you've been sleeping only 6 hours a night for 3 months. You're going to go crazy. That's why I got into a depression. It's because I didn't realize, I thought I was superhuman and I could sleep only 5 hours, and I can't. And my sister told me something interesting. She was like, I knew you had a problem when you told me you were not suffering from jet lag at all. And I was like, oh, that's so true.
It's not possible.
I just wasn't sleeping. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think there is one thing that I think is important is to be a part of the movement. I don't want to be like, oh, Instagram sucks. I was like that for 5 minutes and I regret it. I think it's just life goes on and will go on with or without us. So, go in it and find the things that make you inspired and happy, and listen to the kids, and what makes them vibe and all that. But at the same time, find your personal ways to make yourself a good life and protect yourself and all that. It can't be everything.
Right.
Yeah. But it's such a vast subject. There is many things that I think about the world of influencers and fashion and emotional health and all that. It's a lot.
It's massive.
Yeah.
So final question, what next for the business? What can we expect from your business and going forwards?
So I have to be very private because we're in a moment of big change.
Okay.
And I'm very, very excited. But I think, I can't even go there.
We'll come and watch. We'll come and look
I'll come back and explain
Tell us
and
later.
all that. But I'm excited. It's time for, new things.
Great.
Yeah.
I think that's the perfect way to end, because I think what's key about your life that I've got out of your life is that you like to have a big seismic changes when you're not don't feel like it's just right. you have these big changes. And
It's
we
true.
talk about a thing that British Telecom of all people have here called a lift and shift. When your phone isn't working, they have this thing that they call, okay, we'll do a lift and shift, and then it works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I think that's fascinating how you've made big changes to your life and moved on and refreshed it, and it's really interesting. So I think, just like to say, that was fantastic. Can I just say, what an amazing interview, and Garance Doré.
Thank you.
As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the podcast. If you're enjoying it, hit the subscribe button and leave a review, or if you have something to say, email us at thegrensenpodcast@grensen.co.uk.